Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Unique Items. Since 1.5.0, they changed pretty much all of the unique items in the game, and I figured, you know what, let's go over all of them, and let's talk about all the changes that they've made. So today we're going to be talking about Grasp of Shadow. Grasp of Shadow is a rogue gloves. Why is there always like a fly trying to eat me? Uh, these gloves are for the rogue specifically, and they don't really seem to have much of a identity by themselves because they are set up to be rather generic. They also reduce the number of core skills that you get from these from 4 to 3, which was a little bit of a nerf in my opinion. They do have a 10.5 to 15% increased attack speed, a 6 to 8% lucky hit chance, and then they threw on some ultimate damage, which is kind of interesting. Does work really well with the passive, by the way. Or not passive, the Paragon node called No Witness. No Witness scales based on ultimate damage. And it's a pretty easy way to add in some additional damage to your character. You also get to apply that damage to all of your regular skills for 10 seconds whenever you cast an ultimate. So if you have the ability to obviously spam an ultimate, well then that's going to give you a lot of extra damage. It's just how it works. On top of this, we also get 2 to 3 to core skills, which is pretty standard across gloves now because you can get 2 to 3 core skills on just about anything, any pair of gloves at this point, except for like all uniques. But pretty much all legendaries can roll 2 to 3 core. On top of this, we also have the special effect, which is Lucky Hit, damaging an enemy with a marksman or cutthroat skill has up to a 24 to 44% chance to summon a shadow clone that mimics that skill. And it works exactly as it's stated. If you use an ability, you have a chance for a shadow clone to appear and fire the same attack, as you can clearly see. I just had him up here, and then he fires the same attack. I'm not particularly fond of the shadow clones, personally, myself, because I think the shadow clones kind of sometimes are stupid. They're kind of stupid. Like, this one seems to be firing in the right direction for the most part, but, not always. Sometimes they just fire off into the nowhere land, and it's a little bit difficult. I have had shadow clones absolutely wreck me before, which is interesting. So if you are utilizing, or if you're fighting bosses and the bosses have the shadow clone mod, they can rip you to shreds too, which is really quite interesting. Now, the shadow clone itself only fires one attack. Obviously, it mimics that attack exactly as you have done it. One of the things that is not really quite the same, though, is I don't really think that it applies the poison damage. As you can see, I have about, 354,000 poison damage whenever I hit a target, right? And, of course, if I get a free shot of a shadow clone, I'm telling you, man. Fly trying to eat me. It's trying to eat me. It's literally trying to eat me, guys. The shadow clone that fires off the shots doesn't really have the same damage output as your main attack, obviously, because even though he's copying your attack, he's not copying everything precisely, and of course Materials is making this ridiculously crazy looking. What's the percent chance on mine? 24? It's awful. These are 34s. Let me switch to the 34s. Sometimes you can't really even see it happening, though, which really kind of sucks. Like, I feel like it's so quick and it's so, instantaneous that a lot of the times you don't even really get to see the actually thing happen. Another thing here is that the shadow clone doesn't copy your imbuements, which is also like another whole thing. So when you're dealing with a situation where you're imbuing your skills, it might not necessarily be all that much additional damage if they're not also getting the imbuement. Now, I know for a fact that there is an ability or a aspect, I believe, that has to do with the shadow clone getting your imbuement. So your shadow clone also mimics your imbuements. Skills grant your shadow clone 20% increased damage. Okay. So like this one in particular, we could potentially throw on something just to see. And let's go ahead and just for the time being, let's put it on this ring. I'll replace my Starlight aspect on here later. And let's see if the shadow clone that comes from the ring can potentially copy my imbuements with that aspect. Because if you are using that aspect and you are using the shadow clone, it could be an interesting way to add in an additional shadow clone attack, which I don't know if that works.
Mr. Goody Two Shoes, Mr. Goody Two Shoes. Ginger Evil Mentor here. Why bother farming when you can go to MMOEXP.com and simply purchase your items in gold? GGM would have you farm the items. What a pathetic being. Use code GEM Ginger Evil Mentor for 6% off your entire purchase. And don't tell Ginger Gaming Mentor that I was here.
But we're going to try. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off some poison-imbued attacks. And yes, it looks like he did in fact fire off a poison-imbued attack as a result. So this aspect does in fact work with the shadow clone. So if you're using the aspect of imitated imbuement, your shadow clone that comes from the grasp of shadow will also copy the imbuement, which means that you could potentially be using this with a setup kind of just revolving around, of course, like maybe just stacking shadow clone. Obviously, you're probably going to put everything in shadow clone. You're going to be using the aspect of imitated imbuements, and you probably might even throw on the grasp of shadow too, just simply because, you know, if you're taking advantage of the shadow clones, might as well have an additional shadow clone firing attacks for you. It's basically just another way for you to get a free attack, and it doesn't really matter too much, you know, like what's going on. The only thing that I'm bothered by is that half the time they miss the target. I mean, I would really like it if they fired at the same trajectory as me every single time, and they don't always fire at the same trajectory as you. Sometimes they just like spawn in weird locations. Sometimes they spawn right next to you. But it's not always easy to see. I wonder if we can use rain of arrows. It looked like he copied my rain of arrows. That was kind of interesting. Did he, in fact, copy my rain of arrows? Because that would be pretty cool. Let's try it. Let's try it a couple times. I'm curious whether he can copy an ultimate ability. The second attack that you see, as far as I understand, is not actually the shadow clone. It's something else entirely. So
I'm not ready yet.
it does look like that's the shadow clone. There you go. Yeah, he did copy it, didn't he? He didn't get the double effect, but he did copy it. So that's really quite interesting. So the shadow clone that comes from these gloves can actually copy a myriad of effects. That's really neat. The special flavor text on these is dark wisps creep hungrily across these gloves like an assassin's blade seeking a life to steal on a moonless night. They definitely have come a long way since I think they originally first came out, and they're a little bit better than they were before. I don't believe that this imitated imbuement thing actually worked before, by the way. I'm pretty sure that the imitated imbuement thing was something that did not actually work, and I don't know. It's just it's an oddity in my eyes. I want to see it again. I want to see it again. Yep, he definitely did use the rain of arrows. That was quite interesting. It's weird though. It's like he's not using it immediately. He's mimicking it later. It's really quite neat. I actually really like the imitated imbuement thing too, because if he's copying your imbuements, you can get extra poison damage, you can get extra shadow damage, you can get extra, obviously, cold imbuement for chilling and freezing effects. I mean, in general, it definitely is going to allow you to add some additional bonuses into your build. Now, if you'd like to get your hands on this particular item, you can, of course, farm it. We do have a target farming tool that you can use. Of course, I'll show it on the stream today, but if you ever want to look up items, it's pretty easy to do. You go to Diablo 4.life and you go to Tools, Target Farming Uniques, and in the target farming category, we have the gloves. So we're just going to go Rogue. And then we're going to do the Grasp of Shadow. And as you can see, it drops from Grigore, the Galvanic Saint, and Lord Zir. So if you're trying to get your hands on these gloves, that should be pretty easy for you to do. Anyway, as always, I do appreciate you guys and gals joining me when we're talking about these unique items, even when we're just talking about one of the older ones, which is the Grasp of Shadow. The updates to it definitely have been interesting, and they fixed a lot of the bugs that had to do with the Shadow Clone and not copying the imbuements and some of the other things. It definitely seems like it's in a better place than it was previously. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching. Be sure to hit that like button and the subscribe button if you enjoy the content. And as always, keep watching.